Unemployed People's Assembly.
Johannes Gedialaso, representing NUMSA.
Maiti Mabule, the national spokesperson of United African Transformation, UAT.
Christopher Malikane, member of the steering committee, representative of the academic community.
Zakele Tele, member of steering committee, chairperson of the SSAP in KwaZulu-Natal.
Piet Bartman, DSG of ACT.
Thank you very much for the kind introductions by members of the steering committee, various leaders of the political parties and the trade union movement. Others are not here. It's just the group of representatives. We understand that you are not here as part of the media when we were reading the declaration. We had assumed you were here. It's too long. Not going to read word by word. So I'm going to give about 5 minutes headline highlights. The first, we start with our preamble indicating that we, the political parties, trade unions and federations, community and social movements, cooperative and solidarity economy formations, youth and women's formations, student formations, faith and religious formations, formations, traditional leadership structures, progressive intellectuals, international solidarity organizations, and fraternal, continental, and global organizations of the left, gathered at the Conference of the Left from 29th to 31st May 2026, declare the following. This to give a broad context of the world. Firstly, that we meet in a time of deep structural crisis. South Africa is marked by mass unemployment, poverty, hunger, inequality, social violence. In this regard also includes substance and alcohol abuse, gender-based violence, public institutional decay, ecological destruction, corruption, the crisis of social reproduction, and the deepening power of monopoly capitalism. That across Africa and the global south, working people face neoliberal colonial domination, debt dependency, extraction, sanctions, war, occupation, militarism, and imperialist aggression. We agree that we have not gathered here to lament this crisis. We have gathered to organize against it. And we are indicating that the conference is not to launch a new political party. It is not an electoral platform. It does not dissolve the identities, mandates, programs, or disciplines of the participating formations. It is a collective step towards rebuilding the organized power of the working class and the poor, strengthening unity across the left and progressive forces, and adopting a common program of action for the present period. What binds us is unity in action against capitalism, neocolonialism, imperialism, patriarchy, racism, austerity, unemployment, hunger, inequality, ecological destruction, and monopoly capitalism. And we are indicating that transformation is not derived from above, it is won through organized struggle. We then describe the moment, which partly I have highlighted, which was the main concern of the Conference of the Left about forces, the situation facing our people in the country, and how to respond to this process. In this regard, we have also highlighted that there are reactionary forces that are exploiting popular suffering of our people, who are redirecting anger away from capital and towards some of our people, including migrants, women, workers, informal traders, the poor, LGBTQ plus people, people with disabilities, and vulnerable communities. They offer scapegoats instead of transformation. They divide the oppressed so that monopoly capital can continue to rule. The left has answered this with absolute clarity, that the enemy is not the migrant, the unemployed neighbor, nor the informal trader, the poor household, or the worker from another country. The enemy is the system that produces unemployment, hunger, low wages, inequality, dispossession, violence, and despair. We also appreciate the fact that we condemn illegal migration into our country and called on state institutions to act accordingly. On property relations, state power, working class leadership, and mass action, the conference declared that those who owns and controls the commanding heights of the economy, which is the fundamental question of our time, must be confronted. That without changing this ownership, there can be no real transformation in South Africa. Without democratic control over production, finance, land, energy, food systems, and public resources, democracy remains incomplete. Therefore, the Conference of the Left commits itself to the expansion of public, social, worker, cooperative, and community ownership of the principal means of production. In other words, the principal means of production are things like the mines, the factories, and so forth. Distribution and exchange. This does not reduce socialism, or in other words, to cooperatives, nor to state ownership, for instance, alone. But that we require public ownership of strategic sectors, social ownership, worker control, cooperative development, democratic planning, developmental finance, and production for social and environmental needs rather than private profit. And we also affirm the fact that the conference affirmed mass action as a necessary instrument of struggle. Campaigns, demonstrations, pickets, occupations, workplace actions, community mobilizations, boycotts and strikes by trade unions and communities, which we call to support, where they advance the demands of the workers and the poor. And that mass action must be disciplined, democratic, non-sectarian, rooted in organization, and linked to a clear program of transformation. On economic transformation and alternative economic plan, the conference declared that the right to work and the right to a livelihood are central demands of the working class. That South Africa cannot accept mass unemployment as normal. Unemployment is not the failure of individuals. It is the failure of an economy organized around profits rather than human needs. That is capitalism. Therefore, the conference calls for a public-led program of employment and production driven by public investment, democratic planning, and state-led industrialization, which must include public employment, care work, environmental rehabilitation, township and village production development, food production, worker cooperatives, youth brigades, student work opportunities, local manufacturing, and community-based productive activity. in that the unemployed must be organized as a conscious political force capable of demanding work, shaping policy, and participating directly in new forms of production and social ownership. We also condemned outsourcing, labor brokering, and casualization, which are instruments of capitalist class power. They fragment the working class, weaken unions, lower wages, and turn public service into private profit streams. The conference therefore supports national insourcing legislation and calls for the progressive abolition of outsourcing in permanent routine as a permanent routine and in core public functions. And we've called that South Africa requires a new program of state-led industrialization, and that we cannot overcome unemployment through imports, deindustrialization, financial speculation, and low-wage service work. Also, conference affirmed the fact that financial sector is the central site of class power, that South Africa cannot build a developmental, employment-creating, and socially owned economy while finance is dominated by private commercial banks, asset managers, speculative capital, and debt-driven accumulation. Therefore, as the conference rejected austerity and financialization, it also calls for the nationalization of the South African Reserve Bank and a fundamental review of its mandate, ownership, governance, and accountability. That monetary policy must serve employment, industrialization, developmental finance, public investment, transformation, and the needs of the working class. That's why also conference at its beginning condemned the increase by the Reserve Bank of the interest rate. Conference also noted and highlighted that South Africa's critical minerals must be used strategically for industrialization, not merely exported as raw materials for foreign corporation and imperialist supply chains. That minerals must support beneficiation, public and social ownership, local manufacturing, energy sovereignty, rail and infrastructure development, technology transfer, skills development, worker rights, and decent work. That the mineral wealth beneath our soil must serve the people. And therefore, conference further rejected the false choice between corruption and privatization. Equally, corruption, maladministration, looting, and elite impunity must be confronted decisively. But handing over electricity, rail, ports, water systems, spectrum, public health, public transport, and other strategic network industries to private profiteers is not a solution. Actually, this is a crime against our people. It is the continuation of the neoliberal offensive under another name. On social needs, before I go to social needs, the conference further resolved that corruption and abuse of public trust, including unresolved scandals such as Phala-Phala, must not be suppressed or normalized. The Council of the Left must explore appropriate political, parliamentary, legal, and mass action avenues to ensure accountability, transparency, and public truth. On social needs, land, and democratic economies, the conference declared the cost of living to be a central terrain of class struggle today. Food prices, electricity tariffs, transport costs, fuel, rent, water charges, and basic goods are shaped by monopoly control, profiteering, weak public regulation, financialization, austerity, and private profit. The conference therefore commits to a common front against the rising cost of living, and it calls for price regulation and action against price fixing and profiteering, and stronger measures against monopoly control over essential goods and the defense of affordable basic services as a right. Food, energy, water, sanitation, healthcare, education, housing, and transport must be treated as public goods, not commodities. The conference affirmed that social protection must include the unemployed, students, pensioners, people with disabilities, caregivers, children, and all vulnerable sectors of the working class and poor, and that public services, workplace, education institutions, transport systems, housing, communication platforms, and political organization must be accessible, inclusive, and accountable to the people with disabilities. Also, the conference affirmed the dignity, equality, and full democratic rights of LGBTQ plus people, and the left rejects all forms of discrimination, violence, exclusion, humiliation, and reactionary scapegoating directed against LGBTQ plus people. The conference also calls for the rebuilding of the public health system, insourcing of health support workers, expansion of community health care, public pharmaceutical capacity, democratic accountability, and international cooperation in health, including with Cuba. And the conference indicated that the land, what we call South Africa, the land, and the land question remains central to our transformation. That land stolen through colonialism, apartheid, and capitalist accumulation must be returned to the African people. There's been a better formulation after the drafting of this resolution on this thing to strengthen it. Conference indicated that as presented was even weaker. So when we release this finally, it will be properly strengthened according to appropriate formulation that came from the conference. On social violence, now let me read this part before I go to social violence. The conference also affirms 3 immediate demands on the land. As developmental needs. The transition must not become a new accumulation strategy for private capital. The energy path must be sequenced at a pace the country can afford while protecting workers, communities, energy security, industrialization, and the environment. That South Africa must use an appropriate energy mix, including renewable energy, coal and nuclear, under public ownership and democratic planning, while investing in cleaner technologies, environmental rehabilitation, local manufacturing, and decent work. The conference rejects externally imposed transition models that destroy South African livelihoods, that weaken sovereignty, that deepen energy insecurity, or turn the climate crisis into a new market for private profit. On internationalism, Pan-Africanism, peace, and anti-imperialist solidarity, the conference affirmed progressive internationalism and radical Pan-Africanism as strategic principles of the left. Our struggle is part of a wider world struggle against capitalism, neocolonialism, imperialism, racism, patriarchy, war, occupation, sanctions, and economic domination. The conference stands for peace, against war, against militarism, and against imperialist aggression. The struggle for peace is inseparable from the struggle against imperialism, occupation, sanctions, resource plunder, and the dominance of weaker nations by powerful states. The task, therefore, is not isolation from the world. The task is strategic delinking from imperialist dependency while deepening integration within Africa and the global south. Therefore, conference calls for continental economic integration based on industrialization, food sovereignty, public control over strategic resources, regional value chains, shared infrastructure, technology transfer, and cooperation amongst workers, peasants, women, youth, and progressive states. The conference supports alternative finance system that reduces dependence on imperialist-dominated financial institutions and speculative capital, public and developmental banks, for instance, community and cooperative banking, regional payment and settlement system, use of local and regional currencies where appropriate, debt audits, measures against illicit financial flows, and finance directed towards production, employment, and industrialization, as well as social ownership. That Africa's integration must not reproduce neo-colonial extraction under a new name. It must be people-centered, worker-conscious, sovereign, developmental, and directed towards liberation from capitalism, neocolonialism, and imperialism. And conference expresses solidarity with the oppressed people of the world, including the peoples of Palestine, Cuba, Venezuela, Iran, Western Sahara, and the Sahel. It supports the right of oppressed peoples of sovereignty, self-determination, dignity, liberation, and peaceful development. The conference supports South Africa's case at the International Court of Justice against Zionist apartheid Israel regime under the Genocide Convention and calls for intensified solidarity with the people of Palestine, including public mobilization, boycotts, divestment, sanctions, legal accountability, and the isolation of institutions complicit in apartheid, occupation, and genocide. The conference supports the liberation, self-determination of the people of the group in the Sahel region and expresses solidarity in their struggle against neo-colonial domination, foreign military control, resource extraction, destabilization, and dependency. The conference further supports de-dollarization, strengthening global South cooperation, sovereign development path, public controls over strategic resources, regional industrialization, and continental solidarity against imperialism. On the Council of the Left, Program of Action and Discipline of Unity, the conference resolved to establish a Council of the Left as a standing instrument of coordination. The Council is not a new party. It will not contest election in its own name. It will not replace existing formations or override their autonomy. The Council must be based on equality among participating organizations, that no single formation shall dominate the Council. Political parties, trade unions, community movements, youth and women's formations, cooperative and solidarity economy structures, student organizations, faith and religious formations, traditional leadership structures, and leadership and royal structures, progressive intellectuals, and international solidarity formation shall participate on the basis of mutual respect, democratic engagement, and unity in action. This also includes the religious organizations. Its purpose is to coordinate joint campaigns, shared political education, continuity between conferences, collective interventions, and unity in action. It must be democratic, accountable, transparent, and rooted in working class and popular formation. The first meeting of the Council of the Left must take place within 6 weeks of the close of this conference. And the conference adopt a first phase program of action organized around 7 strategic clusters. The first cluster is economic transformation, which deals with work, livelihoods, industrialization, democratic state trade policy, critical minerals, fiscal and monetary policy, and an alternative economic plan. The second cluster deals with the cost of living, the current crisis that we face, public services, and social protection. The third cluster deals with the land, food sovereignty, and local democratic economies. The fourth deals with public health, national health insurance, and social reproduction. The fifth deals with social violence, community safety, and working class unity. The sixth deals with climate justice and the just transition. The seventh deals with internationalism, Pan-Africanism, and anti-imperialist solidarity, continental integration, and strategic delinking and alternative finance system. The eighth cluster deals with constitutional restructuring. Conference has agreed that the current constitution doesn't serve the people of this country. It serves the interest of capital. So we've established this cluster to deal with how we want to transform and restructure our constitution and have a proper people's constitution that can respond to their needs, not to the needs of capital and profit. Each cluster will have a working group, responsible formations, clear timelines, allocated resources, and 12-month measurable outcomes. The Council must ensure that the program of action becomes a living instrument of struggle rather than a conference document. The left cannot rebuild working class power through declarations alone. It must build the capacity to organize, educate, mobilize, strike, campaign, negotiate, research, communicate, and implement. And that unity is not silence, unity is not the erasure of differences, unity is not surrendering political identity, unity means acting together where we agree, debating honestly where we differ, and refusing to allow our differences to be used by capital and reaction and imperialist forces to weaken the people. Therefore, the conference resolved to adopt this declaration and establish the Council of the Left and develop an alternative economic plan, support campaigns, mass action and strike by trade unions and communities, and campaign for the right to work, insourcing, state-led industrialization, development finance, democratic oversight of trade agreements and foreign loans, strategic use of critical minerals, food security, public services, local government accountability, public ownership, social ownership, worker ownership, develop and campaign for a Cuba solidarity and anti-blockade bill, campaign for strategic delinking from imperialist dependency while deepening African integration and alternative finance system, and coordinate solidarity actions with the oppressed people across the world, establish campaigns and organization against social violence and community safety as a central terrain of left organizing, rebuilding and rebuilding political education, and affirm the leading role of the working class in socialist transformation. The last deals with the call to action, the LGBTQ plus persons facing discrimination, the pensioner, the nurse, the teacher, and the rural poor. They did not send us here to perform our divisions. They are entitled to expect that the left and progressive forces can unite in action, name the system that oppresses them, contest state power, transform society, and fight for a future based on dignity, equality, peace, land, work, public ownership, as well as the unorganized, and lead the struggles of communities and workplaces and become the decisive force for socialist transformation in South Africa. The future will not be given to us. It must be organized. The Conference of the Left begins its work, and it does not end it. Thank you very much. We just want to indicate that there are two formulations that are still outstanding that were debated and were referred, sometimes because on the reading of this text.
We'll take questions from your side. Comrade Nati, I'm sure you will pick the lists if and when they ask the questions. So I will take hands. I'll take
The declaration, I've listened to the declaration, what is contained in the declaration document. Some people would argue that these are not new, and these are you are here if you were to follow the South African context. Ours was an apartheid, and at some point it was dislodged. I mean, that apartheid government was dislodged from power, and it was replaced by democracy. If you were to undo what you're currently lamenting, I know that you said you're not lamenting, but what you're not really happy about, how do you envisage, and how do you envisage the realization of that you want? I think, yeah, that's the only question that I have for now.
Yeah, over to you, sir.
Thank you. I hear the chairperson of the conference talk about Africa and the principles you have enunciated that will guide the work that you will do. But we understand now that, in fact, part of the crisis in South Africa with respect to the local communities in the question of the nascent immediate independence are beginning to describe as fascism itself in Africa because of the destruction that neoliberalism has actions in Mozambique, violence in the elections in the DRC, and violence in many elections and so on. Zambia is going to hold its elections this year on the 13th of August. And I noticed that one of the participants you had in the conference is the president of the Socialist Party of Zambia, Dr. Fred Membe. I'm eager to learn from you. What do you see concretely, besides being Pan-Africanist, being anti-imperialist, being anti-capitalist, and so on? What concrete measures would you begin to take on the African continent to begin to stabilize the problem of hunger, poverty, unemployment, and, of course, extreme inequalities? And then with respect to Zambia, you may or may not have discussed this, you may not or may not have resolved this. Do you hope to be able to intervene in what is happening already in Zambia? Our information indicates that, for instance, you have a government in Zambia today that has abrogated the constitution. It has illegally amended the constitution. They are working, it is working outside the normal norms of legal government. In fact, one cynical, very crude example is that for 7 months, the president of the current government of Zambia has a quarrel with the family of the late president of Zambia. For the first time on the continent, the barrier has not taken place yet. What would be the attitude of this conference to situations such as is in Zambia? And what would be your attitude to the Socialist Party, for example? You had a participant in the conference from that country who, in fact, spoke about poverty in Africa and so on. Thank you very much. My name is Azo Banda from NUMSA Media.
Okay. Thank you, Comrade Banda. We are going to ask the panel to respond to some of the questions. So I can see President, over to you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Mandlana. Indeed, these issues or questions are not new at all. What is new? Sorry. Oh, nice. Thank you very much. Indeed, these demands, these issues are not new at all. But what is new is the fact that the people, the working class and their organizations have realized that fragmentation, to be united, is not going to take them anywhere and any further. They also realize that they seem to have been so preoccupied, with contesting elections and all that, and spending all the time on that. Not that they shouldn't, but they've come to realize that there is life and there is struggle outside Parliament, which must be pursued. And that struggle is so important that struggle must be prioritized to an extent that it must be able to set the agenda for the legislatures, for Parliament itself. And so to that extent, this platform here is developing a shield with which to be able to protect the working class, the people, and ordinary people. It's also building a weapon with which to be able, to ensure that we're not just talking, but we are working towards taking over state power. Not just talking and talking, but this body is working towards taking over state power. And as a matter of fact, what you see here today is not the end of it all. There are still other bodies that are outside that are being spoken to, and they are quite responsive. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Okay. You are correct to say most of the things that have been mentioned are not new. But as my colleague has pointed out, what is new is that various formations in the country and its leaders have come to the realization that the only way we can correct the wrongs that we see in the public domain day in and day out is to come together as South Africans to confront those realities. And the issue of unity amongst those that are fighting for freedom is not new. In 1847, Karl Marx published the Communist Manifesto. In that manifesto, he says, "Workers of the world, unite." We are answering to that call. We're not uniting only to march and come to conferences and make resolutions. Or make speeches in Parliament. That's not good enough. Yes, we're going to have those programs, march and demand this, that, and the other. But those programs are directed, as far as Umkhonto weSizwe is concerned, to assuming political power. By political power, we're very clear, we're not mincing our words. We mean state power. So that state power is used by the left platform to champion the aspirations of our people, especially those that have nothing, those that demand bread and water, electricity, houses, jobs. So that's why we're here. We're here to ensure that we unite our effort against those right-wing forces in this country, wherever they are located, whether in parliament or in government, in business. We are saying, as this left conference, the time has come for us to bury our differences, to bury our petty jealousies, and to come together and confront the system that is in place in our country today. Yes, the issue of state power is very much on our agenda. We're not here to just run around and, march. What are we marching for? If we're not marching to have state power so that we can change the reality of our people. Thank you.
Yes. No, thank you very much, GS, and to the collective. I think we're all going to be responding to a similar point. And perhaps let me go into further detail. It is the first time, for example, that more than 300 political parties, trade unions, social formations, faith-based organizations, and royalty gathers to agree and make a consensus that we are going to oppose the financialization of the South African economy, which has resulted in the productive sectors of our country being undermined and destroyed. Manufacturing, trade, construction, all of those sectors are on a continuous decline, but the banks, asset managers, fund managers continue to make profit. There's no collective that has reached that consensus at this level in the history of this country. It's the first time 300 political parties, faith-based organizations, traditional leaders, youth formations reach a consensus that there must be a support for the cancellation of student debt. That has never happened before. It's the first time there's been a consensus by more than 300 formations that there must be support for national legislation to end outsourcing and in-source workers in all core functions of the state and otherwise. It's the first time. That is what is new about this. It's the first time that a collective of this nature meets to decide that it is going to oppose the exploitation of people, whoever creed or color they may be from. That is what is new about what is happening here. So that consensus alone, considering what Deputy President Mkondo is saying, is a breakthrough. It's an extreme breakthrough that must not be undermined. The ability to reach consensus, not on power brokering, because in South Africa you're too used to attending elective conferences or conferences related to power. Because that's what we know. People can only unite to exchange municipal power or governance power or to elect a president or a secretary. No one was elected here. But people sat disciplined Friday to Sunday, disciplined thinking about the problems confronting the country, the continent, and the world. That is something new and unique that you have never reported on before. So it's something that we must appreciate. It's something that we must applaud. There's never been a collective that says that we must regulate foreign loans from the IMF and World Bank. Because all of us, we sat in this country for 30 years, allowing the Minister of Finance to determine the value-added tax rate, allowing the Minister of Finance to determine the fuel levy, allowing the Minister of Finance to take loans from the IMF and the World Bank without anyone conducting oversight over him, without any parliamentary approval. The collective sitting here has agreed that that must come to an end. So these are meaningful things that are going to change the lives of South Africans. And that in itself is unique and new. And it is correct that ultimately state power must be attained, because if we're going to conduct talk shops, it's going to be meaningless. But the ability to reach consensus, knowing how the left has been fragmented for so long, we've all got differences on this table. It was the first time I saw a healthy debate amongst these organizations, even though there was almost a point where there was going to be a collapse. It didn't happen. Because we're led by leaders who are patient, we're led by a generation that is able to build consensus across different political lines, formations, trade unions, and all of those things. So I think let's appreciate the moment we're in and never underestimate it. It's unique, and a lot is going to be done and the country is going to be shaking. They've been talking ill of the left conference, GS, since before it happened, trying to rubbish it, trying to characterize it as a combination of angry ANC former members, all of sorts of things, all sorts of derogatory commentary. Some of them went to go and meet other structures to try and draw away attention from this meeting. We saw it, but it did not make us falter, did not make us shake. We've defended this left conference publicly on social media, and we're defending it even now. It's something of integrity that is going to continue into the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let me double click on what is new about this initiative. The point of view we come from is that yes, we confirm that there may not be resolutions that are completely new from what you may believe you know. But adding to the bouquet of things that are new is firstly the fact that gathered here is new energy. It's not the old energy that we believe could have taken us aback. An entire generation of leadership, even of the same organizations that you may know, has gathered here to say this generation has to seize the moment to make sure that the left is united, but united for purpose, not for convenience. So to say that the revolutionary moment, therefore, is different and new. What is also new is that more than 300 organizations, left-leaning, are committed to ensuring that we change this constitution of South Africa that we've been complaining about, which all of us agree with unanimity that this constitution is neoliberal. No matter how it has been praised by the enemies of the working class, it does not serve them. And with unanimity, we are saying to ensure that we put them in one place in order to make sure that we do not reform, but qualitatively change this constitution so that it is able to serve the ordinary masses of our people, importantly to transform their lives towards the elevation of their condition. The other question that I think we must get into without apology is the question on Zambia. Any struggle of the left in any part of the world will only succeed when it has allies, particularly our international allies. We've taken a very clear resolution on radical Pan-Africanism. And therefore, in the context of that resolution, we will definitely support radical transformation in Zambia, noting the importance of Zambia in our liberation struggle and what it has contributed in the past. So we will not shy away from supporting the Socialist Party that is here, that joined us and pledged solidarity with our struggles here in South Africa. So within the context of our resolution, of radical Pan-Africanism. We will, in our campaigns, sit down and look at the mechanics of how to support radical transformation that would make sure that emerging after these elections that are coming in Zambia is a radical force that we know would be able to bring back Zambia to the country we know that added impetus to our very liberation struggle in South Africa. Because one of the mistakes of the former liberation movement, which is not here, is that it has forgotten who assisted the liberation struggle. It has abandoned its radical allies of the past. We are not going to repeat that mistake as this generation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Maybe just to add on the new, on what is new. I think it is also important to note the ability that has been demonstrated by the leadership here. And that ability, it's an ability to be able to engage constructively with each other, despite the fact that we come from different political backgrounds in terms of philosophy, ideology, and orientation. We were able to engage respectfully with each other. And that ability, I think, is the one that has been responsible for us to be able to reach a common understanding. It is also for us as the socialist part of Azania, SOPA, exciting that through this session, we have been, as a collective, been able to realize that 1994 did not deliver freedom to our people. It did not give us power. It is also exciting for us to be able to say that the constitution that resulted from the 1994 settlement of the country, which is the black majority. Therefore, with that realization, this conference has been able to agree that a process must be put in action of a new constitution that will warmly respond to their interests and aspirations. So that is part of what is new. For the longest time, we have been having differences about, for instance, the so-called democratic dispensation. Despite the victories around votes and so on, but an ability or to be able to choose your political party and so on. But all of us who
I identify as of significance. It speaks of the GNU. I think it's very important to amplify the point that post that development, we as seated here and those that are still to join have taken a stance whereby we want to use our commonness, Africanness, to show that we can be together and united and counter. I think my colleague from MKP has indicated that there is an inclination for the state power in the near future, that we cannot look down upon. It's to be considered, but we need to take one step at a time. Just to add on the Africa, I think it's very peculiar. Therefore, for the first time, it is a best taste for the citizens of this country that there is a collective like this which take an initiative that those disparities will be addressed directly and without any confusion. Fair enough, having said all this, we appreciate our differences and where we look common. That in itself, for us as people of Africa, is a serious milestone for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think this gathering or this conference represents a more broader popular front that has space and opportunity for communities of poor communities to express themselves. Of explanation or a vacuum where a voice strong enough has not been heard. So disparate voices coming from various people in the more than 4,000 marches and so on that people have been making in various communities has not been given a proper explanation. Our demonstration here is that with our handling of the contradiction that we have even among ourselves, we could be able to take that power and beef up the protest, the voices of ordinary working communities, the working people as a whole, from having a stronger voice and being able to take over power. The other point is that in Southern Africa, there are obviously very difficult conditions created by the imperialist powers, by the finance organization, the Bretton Woods organizations that are financing government. It's actually not the voice of the people. It is the voice of the imperialists. It is the voice of big business, of the billionaires and so on. We can never counter that by merely hoping that our struggles as individuals in Southern Africa and in our country here should not be consolidated, beefed up, and come out with a stronger voice. But we're going beyond that in this conference of the left. We're saying we're going to take mass action. We're going to replicate, if you remember, and this is just a symbol for you to understand, the Occupy movement. We're going to really increase the voice of socialism in our communities so that people are heard and that we reverse the slide wherein the forces of oppression have a stronger vote. We're also saying that it is important to create a voice of the left because the right are doing as they wish. You are aware that in our country here, we've had a right wing that comes in the form of some social movement that say they represent a very narrow, conservative, and myopic view about the interest of the country. That voice comes with the support of big business, of capital, and we must counter that as labor, as revolutionaries in our political parties, and our voice must be strong enough so that it carries weight and can represent the forces of progress in the world. So we're doing this being aware that there are displaced persons in Southern Africa who are, which is created by undemocratic forces in those areas. But it will be naive of us to think that we should not consider the opinion and the voices of the people, the Swazi people, Basotho in Lesotho, the Zimbabweans, all the countries, all the people who belong, because we represent the people and we want a voice that represents the people and and not anything that harms the interest of the masses. That's our position. Well, when we say radical Pan-Africanism, we understand that our issue is basically an international issue, but it must be our issue, meaning our contradictions with capital. It's international. And we have to understand it by forming solidarity with all the people who are oppressed by imperialism. Thank you.
We have one more to the other side.
Maybe we are not agreeing to what I think we are covered by the panelists here. I just wanted to make sure that the country, our people out there, must know that we are united more than at any other time. What is new, you'll remember even in the 80s, it wasn't easy for PAC, ASAPO, ANC, UDF, and other structures to come together. And you can realize now that is what is new today. What is new today, Maibuya, EFF, able to come together here. What is new today, we never questioned because there was that engagement and understanding. And we respect the Communist Party. Our egos were not there as leaders because we realized moving forward, we need to nurture also the leadership, not of the future, of the current. And that's why what is new is our united response since the see our united response to the sell-out position by the GNU. For the first time, youth structures and student structures. Why, in conclusion, I want to say, without any hesitation, we are united and we are going to be united in action. That's what we are going to do. And we'll go down to rural villages throughout the country. And we are saying to our people, we are just giving the message of hope, and they must know that the struggle continues.
Just want to make one. I just want to make one point. I think the just want to make one point. I think the political points have been covered by the leadership present here. I'm not going to go into that. You can understand that's how we've been debating every issue. Everyone speaks, but we have managed to have consensus all the time. So that's very important. And I think Comrade Tambo was indicating that indeed that's unique for the first time. I just want to indicate intellectual in his own right. So we want to wish him well. And I think because he's here, Fred, maybe come here so that they can see you. He's still with us here. The media can. The situation of the working class in Zambia and how he's seeking to resolve these problems together with his leadership collective. But he's a man of great integrity and credentials, and he does in Zambia at this moment in time, and we wish him great success. We know that every success of the region and its integration, it will be a major outcome for the left if it's successful. That's why I want to wish him well in this contest. Thank you very much. I'll take it back to Mandla. Now, we are conferring with each other here that having to answer one question, all of us, is going to keep us here till midnight. So I ask him, unless there are major issues that we have not covered, let's get all questions together, and then we can, we had even Archbishop and several bishops and priests who also addressed conference. We had political parties that were represented by, we expected 79 delegates of various political parties out of 14 that were expected. We had 22 delegates from the trade union movement, both federations and affiliates. We had about 19 professionals and independent intellectuals, including some of our great people at the back here, Professor Chris from the international community, and 18 guests, plus 22 members of the steering committee. Representative here. There is seated the national chairperson of MK Party, the deputy general secretary of the Communist Party, and several other leaders of various organizations at senior level. They still remain